Look how the stars turn on. Look how the stars turn on. When I hold you close. When I hold you close. When I hold you close. The stars turn on.
Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 20 of The Press Box, in association with the unit. It was a case of what might have been for Dundalk and Tala on Thursday night as John Daly's side went down 1-0 to Shamrock Rovers. We're going to look back on that game on this week's show, as well as ahead to a massive Louth Derby clash with Drogheda Utd at Oriel Park on Friday. But it's probably best to start with the ins and outs at the football club this week. So we all knew that Thursday's game against Rovers would be Zach Johnson's last for Dundalk, but he was also followed out the exit door on Tuesday by both Archie Davies, who has signed for Carlisle United in League Two, and Hayden Muller, who has now moved to Sutton United in the National League. I know you were talking to me about the other day. I think you kind of had some sort of inkling that these things were happening, and I know there's reasoning where there's some financial and maybe some footballing, but I suppose, what do you think with kind of the big Louth Derby coming up with us kind of 2 points even just ahead of Drogheda, going in, potentially losing our best player, even though there is some finance involved, not as much as we might have liked, and then I suppose to lose maybe Muller, who's, he's definitely he's not a new player anyway, so he doesn't have to kind of learn on the job on Friday night. So I suppose they're two big guys to lose just before Louth Derby.
Yeah, look, I suppose first and foremost, should probably wish the two lads well, because it's probably a good move for them. They've been decent servants, limited dealings with both of them, but whenever I had to speak to them or whatever, they were very sound. Both have left their marks in various ways that you'll look back on their time fondly. I think Archie, the one player of the year last season, was in PFAI Team of the Year, became a bit of a fan favourite. And for that reason, I think people will probably track his progress, how he's getting on at Carlisle and stuff like that. And even Hayden, maybe never a solid starter in terms of in and out of the side a bit, and maybe he was a sort of utility player. Maybe that worked against him in many ways, that he was always a backup, but in some area he played in a lot of positions for us. But again, if you think back to maybe the winning goal against Rovers in the Cup last July actually, that was one of the best nights of last year, or best days, certainly, when you were holding on with 10 men. And so look, you wish them well. It's as I say, it's probably a good move for them. They're both Englishmen, and they're going back there and closer to friends, family, probably football ambition wise as well. From a Dundalk perspective, I don't think it's good business necessarily. More so on the Davies one, just because he is such maybe your right back shouldn't be an integral part of your team, but he was an attacking outlet. He was great at, getting forward for us. In fairness, our defensive record, particularly in Oriel, wasn't too bad, and he played his part in that too. And honestly, if you had said to me maybe last Thursday, Friday, would this deal happen, I didn't think it would have, for the simple reason that Carlisle weren't willing to go to where the club were looking for. Now I know, look, part of this is maybe that the player's desire was to go and take the opportunity, and you can't begrudge him that. But I'm talking from a Dundalk FC perspective here. I don't think it's good business for us, because we got nowhere near the amounts that I would have mentioned, well below half that. And it's quite frankly pittance, and I think our survival is potentially worth more if we were, and I mentioned 75 to 80 grand last week, and this isn't anywhere near what we got, but if we were getting that sort of money, there's an argument to say, and I get there's a business side to this as well, there's an argument to say that, look, he's out of contract in 3 months, take the money, get a replacement in. Maybe you already have a replacement in that John Mountney wants to be a right back and has wanted to be a right back since he came back to the club, and maybe has never fully got a run there. So if you were getting that sort of money, and look, it's 13 matches or whatever it is, plus the cup, which could be won, you'd say good business despite losing a good player. But I don't think it is good business.
I understand the point you're making completely on a financial sense, but I think, as you said, with 13 games, which is about 3 months left, he's going anyway. He can sign any sort of a pre-contract agreement with anybody come for January, obviously. And
yeah, look, he was
so
never
we're
going to.
on
He
to
was never
nothing
going to.
here anyway.
He was never going to re-sign for anyone. But like, effectively, we've got pretty much little to no more than what his contract would have been worth in terms of add up his weekly wages between now and the end of the season, and that's grand. But you're going to have to pay someone else, is what.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't pay them as much, but it's not like you're coming out of this with something lucrative. Like, I mean, hypothetically, and I'm just talking figures out of my arse here, but hypothetically, had he been 30 grand for the rest of the season and you were getting 80 for him, you'd say, well, we're 50 grand up. And okay, you maybe hand some of that 30, you bring in other players or whatever. I get there's a financial benefit for me in that. But what we've done now, I don't begrudge it. This is nothing against Archie. I can 100% understand why he'd want to go. And for anyone going across the water, and it might be a young player or whatever it is, the summer is an easier time to go. He's straight in. He played in. We're recording this Tuesday night. He's already played his first preseason minutes for Carlisle this evening. So it's a good time for him to go in. He can hit the ground running. He's fit. He's fresh. He should, in theory, be ahead of all his teammates in terms of just a fitness perspective, because he's been playing week in, week out. It's the time to do it. It's 100% the time to do even things like moving house, moving country, etc. It's easier to do it this time of year. Well, ironically, it was lashing rain today, but you know what I mean. Brighter evenings, etc. It's easier to do all that stuff, which he's going to have to do. I completely get it from his perspective, but for me, Dundalk bent over a little, in my opinion, and I don't know if it's the best thing for Dundalk.
Yeah,
and that's
and
irrelevant.
yeah.
That's irrelevant if we like if we stay up or not. We're probably gambling a little bit. Now there's an element like maybe if John Daly, and I haven't had a chance to speak to John, and this wouldn't have been all John's decision necessarily, but maybe John Daly's attitude is right. If there's a player who doesn't want to be here, maybe I don't want them here. But I also don't think, to be fair to Archie or even Hayden, that there would have been any issues with them in terms of downing tools or dummy out of the pram or any of that stuff. But like I say, I wish them well, really do. But you want, I sort of get the Muller thing more. And ironically, Muller had probably produced some of his best stuff for us since John Daly had come in. He'd really done well, particularly alongside Paul Doyle, and he was one of those who really benefited from Daly's arrival. Had become, and there's a question mark over Muller in that, and I said this before, and it's not to belittle him, and again, his sort of versatility is sometimes your hindrance, where if all our midfielders are fit, if all our defenders are fit, is he in our starting 11? And I mentioned he's probably, he was one of the higher paid players at the club, and yeah, you can get that from a business side. But Archie Davies was certainly an asset to us in terms of avoiding the drop, because not alone was he part of a defence that, you know, it's ripped up a lot now with Johnson and Bradshaw gone as well. But I did think just before the break there, you know, when you had that back four of, say, Davies, Johnson, Boyle, and Bradshaw, okay, we might have been towards the bottom of the league, but it was probably as good as most in the league, if not better than a lot in the league. And he gave you that, but for me, he's the best right back was the best right back in the league going forward. Only the one assist this season, but he ironically only got his first assist of last season as well on the June bank holiday weekend, which was the same weekend he got it this year. and then ended the season with something like 7 or 8. So, he can become an asset. Like if you, and we'll talk about this later, but if you bring in a striker, if you even get Gullen back, does how big an outlet is he in terms of those sort of things? Like you go back to some of even kind of pre him, you go back to things like, remember Lewis McCarry's ball in for Robbie Benson the time we beat Rovers. You remember, say, Sean Gannon's ball in for Patrick McElhenney in the cup final. We've traditionally had a good outlet from right back, who've contributed big moments in terms of assists and that. And Archie was as good as anyone in the league at that. And listen, we can only hope that whoever comes in to replace him, be it John Mountney, or I think it's not officially announced, but I think Dan Pike will come in as well, a right back that was most recently on the books at Tranmere. But the big shoes to fill in that regard, because you're replacing the best in the business. And look, again, I mentioned the league race element with Galway before, where they sold them to Rovers and went down. Technically could have stayed up on the final day. Does keeping someone like that give you the extra? And we're only talking about maybe a draw or a win in the difference of swinging results. And that's what that's what I hope doesn't come back to bite us in the ass for effectively little to no financial reward. But I don't want that to belittle what is a very good move for Archie, and wish him well in the future, because he certainly hasn't let Dundalk down in any way, shape, or form in his 18 months here.
Yeah, I think that the bigger element there is that, like, it's also a bigger conversation, but I think League of Ireland contracts and League of Ireland the setups for players and stuff, it very, very rarely benefits League of Ireland clubs. Like, I mean, there's very few. I would say still Bazoon is probably the highest player that went, and that was kind of slightly internal. And it wasn't internal. No, Scales. Sorry, I'm thinking of. Although I think they both went for about 500 grand. But like, again, that's kind of they were big deals. Whereas like even Duff selling one of his best centre backs was 75 grand. So there's just something. Whether it's,
well, like, to put it in context, like RD Celtic have probably done better transfer wise this week from Andrew Wogan's sale from Drogheda to Stockport in development fees than the Dock have done from selling their reigning player of the year. And look, there's definitely a wider argument over contracts, and the summer league element has its benefits. Like, you see, look, Rovers and Derry and Shell's going into Europe this week. Pats will follow, and there's definitely benefits. But it also, like, I was just looking back at it. So we were obviously in Tala on the opening night back in February, and the team that started that night to the team that started on Friday, there was only 3 survivors, and one of them's gone now straight away in Archie. The other 2 are, Benson or Horgan, which are, to be fair to the lads, they're at the other end of their career, where they're not looking for moves abroad or anything at this stage. So, but it's some change, some. And look, and already this week we've had 5, or more last week we've had 5 new arrivals, and more to come certainly before the window's out. So it's a lot of upheaval, for better or for worse. Like, you may listen. For all I know, Dan Pike comes in and he's twice the player Archie Davies was, and I hope that's the case. I really do hope that's the case, but. It's an awful lot of upheaval mid-season, and with for some of these lads. So, like, we'll talk about it in more detail later, maybe. But like the likes of Bobby Faulkner come in straight away into the team in Tala last Thursday. It was his first game, at a proper senior competitive, in front of an audience level since last October. Now, and by the way, I thought he done quite well on the whole. But what I mean by that is you're behind. Like, when you're coming up against, say, we're playing Drogheda this week, so when you're coming up against, say, just say an Adam Foley or someone like that, tearing down the wing against you, that man's fully match fit, he's fully up to speed, etc. And you're maybe only getting there, and are you huffing and puffing with 20 minutes to go? And a bit like all these things, maybe it's not the first game that's the hardest, it's 2 or 3 games in, when you have to recover from, the natural sort of soreness from doing any sport effectively. But that's maybe gone down a bit of a rabbit hole there, but
no, it's not, because of the simple fact that, like, again, you referenced Faulkner playing well, and your man Hikiki started as well, and that's great. But even Hikiki, again, you'd know the stats. He didn't have huge number of minutes, huge experiences. He's
24 minutes this season prior
Yeah.
to last Thursday night. And so he more than doubled his minutes. He played, I think, 66 minutes the other night for us.
So we've that, and I think that just the point, it's funny because you're talking to people, over the weekend and different things, and people like, you're saying we're going to bring in more. So there's like 8 to 9 lads we might be bringing in. I know we've got rid of 4, 5, 6 or whatever it is as well. But again, you're talking about that upheaval. How, like, I'd love to know the general plans, because as I said, at this stage we're 8 to 9 points off safety, let's say. We're only 2 ahead of Drogheda with them to come to Oriel Park. And they've, again, I know they sold their player. They've made a few signings as well that, and I just think, like, where are we? And even these guys that we're signing, sometimes you see some multi-year deals and all this sort of messing, but like, is this long-term planning? Is this, and again, I don't know, is this the League of Ireland? Is this John Daly? Is this Dundalk FC as a club? What is the plan here? Like, again, to be fair to Daly, I read all the pieces that he had to say on the new signings and stuff, and he kind of seemed to know his stuff on them, and I believed in them, and that's good. But like, I'm like, are these long-term solutions? Like, or are we giving all these guys, is it 6 months and we see what happens and all this? Or like, I still haven't seen that player that I'm thinking he's coming in to kind of save us or bring us forward. Now, as you said, all these are absolute unknowns, as was Archie, Davies and stuff. So in fairness, somebody could kick on. But for me at this stage, we're 8 to 9 points off. Like, as you said, 13 games left. Where are we getting these 4 wins in a row at this? And I say this every week now, and the games keep shortening every time I keep saying this. We need 4 wins in a row, essentially, and all the teams above us to drop every point before we could even consider 8. And that's just at this stage looking more and more and more unlikely.
Well, maybe it's a stretch at this stage, as much as, look, John's not given up on it by any stretch of the imagination, but I think at this stage,
don't come last.
Well, look, your primary aim at this stage, and look, the week that's in it, you want to finish ahead of Drogheda. If you can put. Now, the only thing is, and look, we're getting in terms of flow of, like, we talk about the Rovers game in more detail later, but like, we're not badly out of it. Like, if you'd have, like, in terms of like, I think if we still had, and I don't want to harp on about the past, if we had a Patrick Hoban in our team, we're not in an arse's roar of relegation.
But we don't.
No, and I know that, but what I mean is, like, but and we don't, but we also are in the middle of a period, like, we could, and look, easier said than done, we could bring in someone this week who gets you those goals that you're missing. I'm not saying we will, but, and maybe, look, Jamie Gullen's on his way back. He did show a little bit more. Like, we discussed there about how Muller, for example, had been probably a little better in many respects under Daly, and that's a bit of confidence and all the rest. There was definitely signs of Gullen showing that as well. And then he gets that really unfortunate injury that sort of curtails that right after he's probably had his best game in terms of score and return and contribution in that win over Pats. So, maybe he still is the man that gets you You're not talking about.
Gets us what at this stage? Like, what is it now? Like, gets us
Well,
5 goals and become ninth?
if he's
I don't
like,
know. Like, I'm like,
but
what are we
he's
here
five. If
talking about?
he's
Like,
5 goals for he's 5 goals for the season. If he gets a double figure, saying that's a good season. Like, this isn't a league where many are gonna, get to double figures. So I think that's still within Jamie Gollan's remit of possibilities, and like, we've only scored 13 in 23 matches. So, like, even 5 in 13 from one player. And he may not even play in all those. He's still obviously coming back from injury. But, like, if we can find, like, you go back to the Rovers game, like, that's what I mean. Like, that if we had a finisher or a bit more clinicalness, it's not even a finisher. Like, you talk about, and I'm mixing a match here, but like Ryan O'Kane had a chance maybe 3-4 minutes from the end, and a bit more composure, and easier said than done because you're under pressure and whatever, but a bit more composure, and you get a draw in Tala.
Cameron Elliott,
And Elliot, like again, he had a couple of chances, one a header, one he forced a save from Leon Poles, and the one at the near post, I think, and I said it to Adrian Half on commentary on the night. I said, I think someone in form with a bit of confidence goes across the keeper to his far post there, and they're just those little things that aren't going for us at the moment. But, like, again, yeah, look, I'm not one for moral victories or anything like that, but it was us pushing at the end. It was Rovers hanging on. We haven't, like, it's 10 matches in a row now. We haven't won in Tala, going back over 5 years at this stage. So it's not like we've had a recent history of going there and getting results. We don't. But that was probably as close as we've come in a lot of them. Like, we went up there a few years ago with probably, like, on paper and league table wise, a far better team, potentially in the running for a league title, and got brushed aside 3-0. And it was a comfortable 3-0 for Rovers. That wasn't a comfortable win for them the other night. Maybe, again, put it in boxing terms, they probably shared it in terms of possession and overall chances and that, but they were still hanging on at the end. And if you have that just little bit of...
But they're probably in the worst form of 5 years. And what I'm saying is that they were still able to grind that result out, whereas we couldn't. And that,
and we didn't look, and we didn't test them enough. Like, they had come in on a horrendous run of form.
Yeah.
Like, even Leon Poles, like, to be fair, there were great strikes the previous week by Simon Power, but he was beaten twice from range, and no one took a pop at any point from range to say, let's just test this guy out and see what he's made of. Now, again, like anything, maybe he's equal to it, but like that would have been one of the first things I'd be thinking of entering that pitch on Thursday night, was this guy's under a bit of pressure, even from his own supporters to a certain extent. Scrutiny's definitely on him, and let's see what he's made of. Because, again, you go back to the Sligo game, 6 days earlier, and he lets... And again, good strikes. I'm not necessarily blaming the goalkeeper, but when there's scrutiny on you, pile it on, see what he's made of. And we didn't do that. Like, 85 minutes to have your first shot on target. I thought, and I must add it up actually, but there's probably half a dozen matches this season, albeit not all under John Daly's management, but there must be half a dozen matches this season where we actually haven't registered a shot on target. And I thought that was going to be another one on Thursday. We rallied well and did have a little bit of a push late on, to be fair. Norman Garbett in particular, I thought, really livened it up when he came in, and maybe someone like him now, you can look great in a 10-minute cameo or whatever, and let's see what he's made of over a longer period. But he's certainly one who got you a little bit excited and looks like he could create problems and all that. But it's look, it's too early to see. But yeah, going back to the exits, I think Davies in particular is a big loss. Muller, as a squad member, definitely. Again, you're trying to predict the future in terms of I think injuries there, because, like I say, and it's only my opinion, and it's not to be harsh on Hayden, I think if we have a fully fit squad, I don't think Hayden Muller makes our starting 11 most weeks. But how often do you have a fully fit squad? He can fill a lot of roles. He's played left back, centre back, right back, centre midfield. He's filled a lot of voids for us. Now maybe John Mountney's that person now because he's done pretty similar, bar maybe centre back, but yeah, it's 13 matches, and look, I think the player wanted to go back, and you wish both of them well, as I say. But in relation to the Davies one in particular, no, we got nothing from Muller for what it's worth either. So, but it's probably more about wages off the books, that one, to free up space for other ones. But and look, it definitely suited the player. There's no doubt about that. But are we in a better place? Probably not. And like, look, I can understand from. It's a bit like, if you're buying a car off me, you're not too pleased if I say, you know what, I know you're buying that car off me, but I'm just driving to Cork and back at the weekend, and then I'll give it to you. You want it kind of straight away, and you want it in the condition you've agreed to, like, because I mean, from Carlisle's perspective, well, from the Doc's perspective, you'd have loved to held on to Archie Davies for certainly Friday night. But from Carlisle's perspective, what if he breaks a leg? What if he gets injured? Serious, like anything innocuous could happen. So, yeah, not ideal timing either, because it's probably our biggest game of the season. Definitely our biggest game of the season on Friday, and you'd rather have had your, as I say, one of your most consistent performers available for it.
I know you referenced all the kind of Rovers game, but I know we have 2 or 3 questions that people have sent in, but I know you wanted to reference your per refereeing by Mark Lynch again now.
Yeah, no, look, I don't want to be just at referees all the time, but I just thought, like this is a guy. So for Mark Lynch, it's only his 4th game at this level, but I just thought some of the things were poor. Like for a start, there was 8 yellow cards. Owen Kenny had a really late one on Aaron McAniff. Stephen Bradley wanted red for it. You probably couldn't have had an argument, but it wasn't a dirty game and 8 yellow cards. But what annoyed me about it was just how, little he and his team did to sort of, ensure that lines were adhered to. So there was a free kick just before half time, which for me wasn't a free kick. Bobby Faulkner got booked for giving it away. But aside from that, Jack Byrne actually drags the ball back 10 yards to give himself like a better chance of getting it up and down, and curls it just wide. And like, had Rovers gone 2-0 up at that stage, it was curtains for Dundalk. And little things like that. Again, second half, a ball went out of play. I think Darren Nugent took the throw, but the ball goes out at one end of the Rovers dugout, and they're quite long dugouts in Tala, and he takes it at the other end, and by doing that in the wrong position, it took 3 Dundalk players out of the game. Now again, nothing comes of it because we get away with it. Not, didn't lead to a goal, but just basic things that you expect a referee to be stronger at, and it's a thing with refs in general that I think they need to be better. They need to be, like, ironically, I see we've Rob Hennessy this Friday night for the Louth Derby. I think Rob Hennessy's last game refereeing us was the game in Pats, that 3-2. And like, what baffled me that night, and look, it didn't come back to bite us in the ass or whatever, but like, Cammy Elliott's going through 1-on-1, knocks it past Joe Redmond, who fouls him. He's 1-on-1 with the goalkeeper, and it's a yellow card to Redmond, but surely as a last man, it's a red. And, okay, it doesn't come back to bite you in the ass, but it doesn't make it right. So, like, little things like that, I think that just the refereeing standards, I don't want to keep going on about it, but this is now sort of life or death. We're like, if we go out Friday night and we win 3-0 or lose 3-0, you want it to be, what, Drogheda with this class, or, it's a moment of magic or moment of brilliance. You don't want it to be a refereeing error or flaw or that, and it's basic stuff. If a free kick is given in a certain position, make sure it's taken in a certain position, not 10 or 15 yards further back because it suits the taker. And I just think he needed to be stronger there.
Right. Well, we do
Rant
have
over.
3 questions that came in, and as always, our questions are in association with Malone Financial Services. Simon Canning said, "Is it not madness to sell one of your best players, which will no doubt weaken the team, and then when we're 2 points from bottom and really struggling to score goals?" I think you discussed that. To be fair, Kevin Mullen said, "Worrying that we've not found a goalkeeper or striker yet. Key areas between now and the end of the season." So that kind of does actually move on. There is a keeper coming in, isn't there? Or
Yeah, so again, and maybe, so we're recording this on Tuesday night. I'd imagine just today was a sort of, today being Tuesday was a sort of day of exits. And, to be fair to the club, did nice pieces with Archie in particular in terms of you know, it was a proper goodbye in many respects. And I would imagine tomorrow, Wednesday, we will see more arrivals. So I'm pretty sure the deal for Dan Pike is done. So again, as I mentioned, he played 16 matches for Tranmere Rovers last season, 8 of them from the start. He was on the books of Blackburn as a youngster, so he's probably going to be our right back, or one of our right back options now that Archie's gone. And in relation to the goalkeeper, I think Felix Goddard is coming in from, again, Blackburn. So they probably know each other. They definitely know each other. There would have been brief crossover there. So again, maybe that helps in terms of them settling in or whatever. Don't know a lot about Goddard in that he's won senior career appearance in the FA Cup for Marine FC on loan, and it was a 5-1 defeat. Now, look, that doesn't necessarily mean it was the keeper's fault, but a bit of, he's inexperienced, let's say.
well, what, like, in theory, I would have assumed if we were bringing in a keeper, because Monroe he hasn't been great. There's no getting away from that. I thought we were going to bring in somebody more experienced, and to find out that this guy is, if anything, less experienced and ready for senior football than what Monroe is, I'm kind of thinking, well, we already have, you're talking about finances and stuff at the club. We already have Peter Cherry, who's well fit to jump in. We had the young lad who, in my opinion, did very well when he came on. And what's the point of this? Like, what's this signing about then? If it's a lad just coming in from one appearance in non-league FA Cup or
Look,
whatever it is,
you have to see, you have to start somewhere. And again, I haven't gone down that rabbit hole, but I'm sure there is a lot of footage for him. He's obviously played under 21, under 23 level, that sort of thing, and I'm sure that's been taken into account in terms of potential. He's a bigger man than, I think he's 6'3" or something. So he's a bigger man than Monroe. I think that's one thing that maybe Monroe lacks, is that sort of physical presence in goal. But to be fair to Ross, he did make a pretty decent save from. I don't think he could do anything, but the goal from Johnny Kenny the other night was a brilliant finish across him. But then he made a pretty good save from him. Just shortly after that with his feet. Probably the one disappointment for the goal is we kind of got out of jail, where I think Trevor Clark got down the left, and it looked like Kenny was in, and I think Bobby Faulkner got a decent block in, and Monroe has the ball, and maybe away from home, you look. Hindsight's a great thing, because if you end up breaking up the field, you'd say it's great goalkeeping, but his ball to a Kiki, maybe he should have held on to a bit longer. Then Hakiki was a bit maybe naive, and he went down, said to go down the channel, he came back inside, ran into trouble. Sean Hordis possessed him, then it's a brilliant ball by Watson to Kenny for the goal, but it was one of those probably easily enough preventable. And maybe I don't think, like, if that ball's out to Horgan or Mountney, you probably don't concede it, because I don't think they allowed themselves to get dispossessed there. But that's part and parcel of maybe a young player. But in relation to, so that's the goalkeeper. I do think, as I say, Felix Goddard will be coming in on loan. Look, again, I did look into it. There was no contact. I'm not saying he'd be interested, or I don't know, but there was no contact with Nathan Shepherd. Just someone we know is available, who's played with some of this back four and the team, etc. So, like, if he's lining up with Andy Boyle, Mayo, Anna Massahun, whoever it is, he knows them. But look, again, to be fair, we saw 4 of the new signings on Thursday. Hayden Khan didn't play, obviously, and we'll have certainly probably 2 more, I'd say, for Friday, if not more. But there's none of them bad signings at this moment in time. So all you can do is give them the benefit of the doubt and hope. As you said, you listen to John Daly. Now, I will preface that and say I've never heard a manager on a sign and say, well, this guy's actually pretty crap, but we just sign him because we need bodies or something. They're all going to talk every signing up, but look, we have to trust him that he sort of knows what he's doing, and that, look, I don't think any manager, when you're bringing in 6, 7, 8, 9 players, whatever it is, I don't think you're going to get all of them right, but you just hope you get more right than wrong. They are looking at striker options. It's obviously the hard one in that I think everyone's looking for it. I think Bo's made a pretty decent sign on paper this week in Alex Grieve, coming in from St Mirren. We've 2 sort of targets, I believe, at the moment in that regard. Too early to say whether they'll happen or not. But I would agree with Kevin. I think Eamon Kenny asked the question as well about strikers, that it's probably something we need. Now, I do stand over the fact I think Gullen coming back will certainly help in that regard, but maybe we probably do need another option there, certainly.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I hate the thought of it's July and we're talking about bringing 8 lads in and hoping everything changes and everybody gels. And I think the business model for that, for like, if that's any other company or anything that's not a football team, like, you'd be like, it's just so hit and miss. There's no plan and there's no this and this. And it just seems that everything is roll the dice on this one, roll the dice. And to be honest with you, I just think that's not good enough. And it will have to change by the end of next season, whether we're in the Premier or the First Division. And
no, but I think you have to put it into context. And look, it's not ideal, there's no doubt, but the whole sort of whatever the plan for this year was got massively ripped up by all the ins and outs. Like,
don't sign everybody on loan for fucking 5 months at the start of the season.
Well, to be fair, that was a previous regime, so I don't think
same ownership, man.
Well, no, yes, but it was Stephen O'Donnell management, and you can go into it. Like, I don't know whether people want to bring Brian Gartland into that or whatever, but it was that regime that did it, and I sort of get why you do it. We discussed that before, but even we would have had people sort of in our targets, at various points this year. People like Stephen Mallon, who's now at Sligo, people like Bobby Burns, who's now at Galway. They're both coming from the north, so Dundalk is probably a more geographical, anyway, obvious place for them to go. But they've gone elsewhere in the league. Now, I don't know if either of them are going to be a success at those respective clubs or not, but they were the sort of, amongst others, sort of people we were looking at, but they maybe weren't necessarily what John Daly was looking at. So that whole model or whatever gets ripped up. Ben Wilson was someone I mentioned before that was very much in his targets. He signed for Airdrieonians in Scotland in the championship. So, like, it is something at any level. Like, you go to, like, well, maybe Man City aren't necessarily looking for it with Haaland and Alvarez, but like, you go to, like, do Arsenal need a striker? Like, I seen Piers Morgan on Twitter earlier, like, begging them to sign Ivan Toney, for example. It's probably something that every club's looking for. Like, I know Man United are in the market for a striker right now, and that's at the very upper echelons of the game. So it's the same. Like, would Shelbourne are top of the league, but they probably don't have an out and out, guy who's going to get them, what, 6, 7, 8 goals between now and the season. And maybe someone goes on a run, I don't know, and maybe it's not necessarily a traditional number 9, but everyone's looking for it, and it's hard to come by. And maybe there's not the traditional goal scorers in the game that there used to be in general. But yeah, look, the hunt is ongoing, shall we say.
Right, well, before discussing Friday's Crunch Louth Derby, let's hear from our main sponsors, The Unit.
Today's episode is powered by The Unit, experts in building innovative products for the betting, iGaming, and sports industries. They're the brains behind building innovative products tailored for those who love the game as much as we do. From software that powers up the betting world to platforms that enhance how we engage with our favourite sports, the Unit is leading the charge. The Unit, a winning team that reminds me of the Kenny era Dundalk in their consistency and results. Proud sponsors of the Press Box podcast. Learn more at theunit.dev.
Right, so the Louth Derby on Friday. An amazing point against Shelbourne on Thursday for them. Kind of means that they can actually now overtake us with a win on Friday night. I suppose luckily enough for us, I think their last victory was against us. They haven't won away from home this season. The shockingly, there's not any other club I can think of that I could say, well, is it really in our favour here? But I suppose in your head, with the localness, with the positions in the league, I suppose I can't remember, and ironically we're playing the cup next week, but a one-off big or Louth derby in the last few years.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about that today myself, where and someone will probably bring up something from maybe the 70s or 60s or something, but I doubt that, because the history of the clubs has been sort of overlapping, in that for most of the respective clubs' times in the league, Dundalk have been the big fish in Louth, and even when Drogheda had their probably best spell in the sort of mid to late noughties, when they won a league, won a cup, etc. Dundalk were in the doldrums of the first division, so yeah, there's been a few shock results over the year. You think back to the sort of the Kenny era, when we had our brilliant spell and few years, etc. And these games were there was cannon fodder. Was it 6-0, 7-0? Was there another six? I think there was 2 6-0s. And it was pretty, on the whole, uncompetitive. Now that doesn't mean there wasn't shock results. You think back to the opening game of 2014 when they beat us 4-1 up there, etc. But a bigger one, I don't know. The last one in Weavers Park seemed pretty big. Prior to that, you're probably going back to maybe the cup semi-final in 2013, the really controversial one. But even at that, and it's fitting, because we do play them in the cup the week after. I think, if you're told now, and I know the world doesn't work this way, but you're going to win one, lose one, you take the win in the league every day of the week, and again on Sunday. Cup's nice and all that, but this is about staying up. And I wrote about this today, and I said, regardless of who goes down, I think Dundalk or Drogheda, I think most outsiders will probably back them to be, you'll come straight back up or whatever. But from Dundalk's experience of 7 years down there before, with a pretty good side who had just won a cup, still at European football, that's not a dice anyone wants to roll necessarily. And it's so big that, look, you could go through stats, and I know you mentioned some of them there, Drogheda, and just a really good point against Shells, who actually haven't beaten them this season, but and that means they can overtake us with a win on Friday. Their form's been pretty bad, just 3 points, 3 draws away from home all season, and they're the only side in the division yet to win away from home. Now, one of those points was in Oriel Park on the 1st of April, when there was a 0-0. As you mentioned, they haven't won since beating us through Hayden Cahn's 94th minute winner on the 6th of May. They've played 9 games since then, drew 3 and lost 6. It's August 2021 since they last beat us in Oriel. But
Good
I say all
signings,
that. Yeah, no, but I say all that, and it's probably one of those where stats don't matter. It goes out the window. It can I mentioned referees earlier. There's been 23 red cards in the last 33 matches between the clubs. Discipline could be huge on Friday. You're right that I think they've signed well. They haven't brought in as much as us, but I think they're more sort of tried and tested at this stage. Like Alicia Awi was there before on loan, and for me at the time, ironically, had Archie Davies left, I would have been quite happy with Awi coming into us. That's how impressed I was with him when I seen him. So as much as, and not every new sign will work, that's as close to tried tests as you're going to get because he's been there before. Shane Farrell coming in from Shells, I think, is exactly the sort of player you want when you're in a dogfight like that, because he'll run all day for you. He'll get stuck in. He's pacey. He caused us problems in the past before, and he's the type of player you'll hate if you're the opposition, but you'd love him on your side. And I think he's a brilliant signing in that regard. And then Douglas James Taylor, again, the Walsall connection, not someone I would know a great deal about, but has played at League Two levels, scored even in the FA Cup in the past. And off the mark already, albeit from the penalty spot on Thursday night. But as a striker, sometimes the longer the wait for that first goal goes on, the more hindrance it is. He's off the mark already, confidence is up. And even though he's a new signing, they actually signed him at around about mid to late May. So he's probably been there 5-6 weeks. So even though last Thursday against Shells was his debut, he's only actually, like, he's been assimilated into the squad and the setup. So he knows people. He's had time to sort of settle in. Did France Pirro back from suspension as well, which gives him another option up top. And in a way, everything points to maybe another 0-0, because you look at, like, we've only scored 13 goals all season, only 4 of them in Oriel in 11 matches. They've just 7 goals on the road all season, 1 less than Pats and 2 less than us. Now they've conceded the most in the league away from home, but it's a very difficult one to call, because you could go through normal form guides and that, and I think it all goes out the window. I think the crowd's going to have a huge part to play on Friday night, and again, mistakes will be punished. I think the referee needs to be strong. We're probably likely to have Jamie Gullen back probably on the bench, I would say. Andy Boyle, I don't think will make it, so we're going to have a new centre-back pair, and we're going to have a new right-back, whatever that, even if it's John Mountney going in there. So a lot of sort of things up in the air that, it's going to be, I think it's going to be a nervous night in many respects, because it's one of those where, you dare not lose it. You dare not lose it. And I mean that for either team, because, we win, we're 5 points clear of them, and games are ticking away, and equally. And with that, I mentioned Douglas James Taylor. I mentioned that Walsall connection, and I'm kind of fearful of them maybe putting a load of players in there. I think they still do need support. I think their bench at the moment is a lot of kids. That probably isn't a massive factor with just Friday in mind, but I'm thinking for the rest of the season, I think they do need a bit of support, and do also throw a handful of players on them, or even sign a few late in the window, maybe that they see as sort of up and coming players, and give them the 6 months of Drogheda, get them the experience, but equally one eye eventually going back over there. I'm not saying that'll happen. I just have a fear it could, and that's something we won't have, in terms of, we don't have this overlord that can maybe do that for us. So, yeah, it would be a big one to win. Big one to win. But right. These are the moments you live for too, like, in terms of, like, you'd rather it was at the top of the table, but in a weird way it probably means a little more. Because no one wants to be in the first division.
And it's there's no getting away from it. You're chatting to people all during the week and stuff. And listen, it's football is a success business. There's the diehards, but there's, not 90%, a high percentage of fans are, if they're doing well, people are interested, and that's just life. That's the way it goes. But like, when you are talking to people about Dundalk lately, but I found like people aren't as interested because like, oh, they'll go down and blah blah blah. So whereas this is a massive game, so like no disrespect, but like if we're playing, is it Galway at home after this?
No, well, we've the cup,
Or
and then
okay,
it's
whoever we're playing, doesn't matter.
both.
Just say it's Galway. Let's say it's Galway.
It's
Galway,
both.
okay, both, whatever. Doesn't matter who it is. Nobody's really interested. Whereas the Dundalk Drogheda thing, it's a 9th, 10th thing when you're playing a team that's 4th, 5th, and that are pretty big favourites and stuff. It doesn't put as many bums on seats now with us, with the big gap now. So I have to say, even from a financial perspective for the club right now, it's important to get as many people in the door. Because
Yeah,
as I said,
and that's a concern. So I don't think we touched on this last week, but the Waterford game, I think, was a 2073. Just off the top of my head, definitely less than 2,100 anyway. I think it was 2073 or maybe 2037, something like that. But a small enough crowd, and bear in mind, first game after the break. I know it's holiday time, but the first game after the break, and Waterford doing well. In terms of like, I know it's a bit of a trip, but generally when teams are going well, they'll bring more to the matches, etc. And you wouldn't like to see that continuing because, like, I don't go into this every week, but the finances aren't great. That's the reality, and it's as much as we're battling on the pitch, we're sort of battling off it as well, and fans need to be maybe conscious of that. I know you don't just throw someone money for the sake of it, but you are needed, and particularly you're needed on Friday night and every Friday night we're in Oriel, as far as I'm concerned, because the one major strength we've had this season, look, we haven't won enough matches at home, but we did go on that 8-match unbeaten run at home, and if you didn't have that, you'd be gone already. You wouldn't even be in ninth right now. So our home form has been crucial, and it will be crucial if we're to, even if it is just to consolidate ninth and take our chances in a playoff. But part and parcel of what makes Oriel a bit of a fortress, and has been a fortress over the years, has been that sort of, it's an uncomfortable place to come, and then the fans sort of add to it, and it does get our players up for matches. There's no question about that. So you're needed. Like, I sound like one of those like American sort of "your country needs you" posters or whatever, but it is true. Like, like when the chips are down, that's when you're needed more than ever. And I think it'd be great to have a bumper crowd in Oriel on Friday night, because like, if you can't get excited about this one in terms of like, again, you'd love it to be at the top of the table, and you're both going for a league title, but in many ways, because it's at the other end, it means almost more. And and these are in theory,
but they're the diehards. Them numbers are the diehards. So let me just I honestly am annoyed at myself now because I'm looking at the time, because I know we want to continue into our hour kind of slot. But if I think 2,000, anywhere from 1,500 to about 2-3 for Dundalk is your peak diehards. So anything over that is not a diehard fan. So what brings them to Oriel? There's the new infrastructure thing that I've seen from Sligo, Finn Harps, Drogheda have done things. We haven't. There's nothing coming in that direction. So there's nothing that shows me, right, well, there is going to be progression. There's going to be better facilities. Even the match day experience. There is, you can get your cups of coffee, and there's the Mullins, and there is great things, but I still think it could be better. Like I referenced, like you referenced finances, but what I'm referencing is a match day experience. And again, I said this 100 times, we can do a good hospitality package for people, and that brings in more money. And in fairness, I think to give the sponsorship people their due, I know every game is sold out or whatever in the sponsorship capacity for the rest of the season, so they're doing that. But you have to do more if it's a financial thing you do. But there also has to be, like, young lads that I'd be chatting to, like, do you go to Oriel? Like, no, like, they just don't feel it. So it's a new era of people and lads coming up. Of course, all the guys that are maybe 40, 50, 60, 70 and above that were the diehards, they're grand, but they're going to fade out. And you have to make sure. So what's in it for these 15-year-olds, for these 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds? They have other options to go on. And I think that's a bigger discussion. I think, Absolutely. Let's all get down and support. But ultimately, if you take, like, you take Leinster rugby, they couldn't get 1,500 people at a game 20 years ago, but they redeveloped things. They tried to, make experiences in so many different ways. And standards, there was more investment, but that is communication with the FAI, with the funding boards that we just don't seem to be getting involved with. So there's an element of this that it's their own fault, that I think our diehard or things are from 1,500 to probably 2-3. I think if we wanted to get to 3 to 4 to 5, that's on us. That's on us.
Yeah, look, and that's a process, to be fair. And I don't want to take away from, there has been some good work done, and we're going to talk maybe about things like the community boot room in a second and stuff like that. There has been small steps taken. Results, obviously, like I said, we're top of the table. You're automatically getting more in. That's just a fact. Definitely more needs to be done. But there's legacy
I'm just talking
issues
match
there
day
as well.
stuff now. I'm just talking
and I agree with you. I agree with you, because look,
because I do think actually off the field stuff in the club has been very good this year.
But I mean, Bows, who are our next opponents after the doubleheader against Drogheda, now it's in Oriel, but like they're a prime example of a club who, they don't have luxurious, but they've made it cool. They've made it part and parcel of, a Friday night. And yeah, I 100% agree with you. And it doesn't help. And you touched on there, and I'm glad you did, because I think it might have been Mark Reed last week. I'm sorry if it's not Mark, but I think it's Mark Reed, asked about, did we get the large scale investment fund application in on the deadline? I'm led to believe we didn't, which is again disappointing, because it's another year gone on a local context, and not just because we're playing them this week. Drogheda did, and had quite a comprehensive application. So you're probably automatically behind Drogheda now. And questions need to be asked about that. And there's a lot of sort of concerns necessarily, but there's probably, I did mention in recent weeks, like, I'd love to have a chat with Brian Ainscough. I thought it was going to happen maybe last week, and unfortunately he went back to America before I got a chance to sit down. I don't think it's something you could do over a phone necessarily, or over, it probably needs to be a proper sit down chat. And listen, maybe that's not even necessarily with me. I'd like to do it because I have an interest in it. But I do think there's, regardless of who it's with or whatever medium it is, it probably needs to happen. Just an opinion. But about the overall direction of the club, it's been, like, let's not sugarcoat it. It's been a very difficult sort of, I don't think he had a honeymoon, but if you want to call it a honeymoon period, it's been rocky at times. Again, you couldn't have envisaged maybe a relegation battle, but that's where we are. But like that, yeah, look, fans will be fickle, and yeah, you're right, the diehards will go, and you probably don't get the sort of floating voter, for want of a better term. And yes, more needs to be done in terms of the match day experience. I'm 100% with you on that. But, this is the week maybe to spread the word that, like, it is a big game. There's local bragging rights. It's exciting. Like, this is in a way, I'm not going to put it on Cork 2014 sort of territory, but it's not far off that. And it's, by the way, it's your neighbours down the road, and there's a natural rivalry between the two towns anyway. So, if you're going to Oriel on Friday night, try and convince someone else to come. That's what I'd say. And I know it's such a cliche thing, and it doesn't mean to come back the week after, but again, I'm a firm believer the crowd does make a difference, in terms of on-field performance, and there's obvious knock-ons. The other thing, I think, yeah, it's a wider issue, probably definitely needs more discussion, but for this week, let's hopefully we can beat Drogheda and beat them in front of a better crowd than we've seen in the recent past, in the likes of the Waterford game.
And to be fair and balanced, as I was saying, the great things that the club are doing off the field as well. They actually launched a community boot room in the Youth Development Centre on Oriel Park on Friday. The new initiative was set up to enable children and families without boots and equipment to take part in sporting activities by making use of donations made to this community boot room. The boot room is going to be open Monday to Friday from 9 till 9 by contacting one of the key holders that will be on the premises. If you want to donate any football boots or sport equipment that are in good condition now, contact Aoife Burns at the club. And Aoife's email is actually aoife.burns@dundalkfc.com. We are going to move on to the underage roundup, but before we do, I wanted to give solid listener Muller a shout out, who got married last week, so I wanted to wish him and his wife Annabelle well. Hopefully he's on a beach listening to the press box somewhere. And also on some sad news as well, Owen Gray, who has been involved with the club in many different capacities and runs a business in the town, has sadly passed away as well. And I know you wanted to send condolences as well. You would have owned through the years with different things.
Yeah, I think most people know Owen for, well, aside from the jewellery business there in the domain that his son Alan obviously runs now. I think he best known for the likes of the OG Cabaret show and raised, wouldn't like to hazard a guess, but thousands anyway, if not more, for charities over the years. Big involved in the music sort of scene in the town, and big into his football, and one of Dundalk's sort of great characters, and particularly for Alan, because I know Alan's a diehard, member of the Tie Rap gang. I want to send out the sympathies, because great supporters of the club, and very sad to hear of his passing, and I'm sure he'll be remembered in some way by the club this week, and certainly by the town as a whole.
Right, well, before we go, we will let yourself bring us all the underage action in association with Jerry McNamee Consultants.
Yeah, Jerry was back actually at that Waterford game, and got a nice jersey for his trouble. That's the longest running 60th party of all time. So fair play to him. So yeah, a couple of good results at the weekend actually. On Saturday, the men's under-20s under the management of Jason McConville, following Mark Griffin's departure to take up a coaching role at Newry, they beat Club Kildare 2-1 away in the first round of the Enda McGuill Cup. Mohammed Harris had opened the scoring in the game, but it took a 92nd minute winner from Aaron Donnelly to secure the win. The men's under-15s also had an impressive 6-0 win at home to Mayo FC, with Shea Savage, Jordan Facella, Callum Woods, who scored twice, Mickey Cummins and Sean Platt on target. Meanwhile, the men's under-14s had a 3-3 draw away to Finn Harps, with Adam Zivkovic scoring a hat-trick for Keane Mulligan's side. Unfortunately, the women's under-17s went down 8-0 at home to Shamrock Rovers in the Cup on Saturday. On Sunday, the women's under-19s also suffered a 5-0 defeat at home to Bows, but it was better news for the men's under-17s in the first round of the Mark Farron Cup, as they beat Galway 2-1, with Nico Lovrakovic and Aaron Donnelly grabbing the goals. This Saturday, the men's under-20s travelled to face Galway at 2, with the women's under-17s also facing Galway away at the same time. Meanwhile, there's another Louth Derby at under-15 level on Saturday, as the men's under-15s travel to face Drogheda at 11 a.m. On Sunday, the women's under-19s are away to the DLR Waves at 3, while the men's under-17s are away to Athlone at 1.
Right, well, we'll leave it there this week on the press box. Thanks again to our main sponsor of the unit, as well as our associate sponsors, PlayerFit, Jerry McNamee Consultants, and Malone Financial Services. As always, if you want, you can watch us on YouTube every week. And thanks again to Jason in Mullins on the Castledown Road for sponsoring that. So it's a big week with the Louth Derby coming up. Let's hope we get the Bragging Whites this week, and we will chat to you next week.
Look how the stars turn on. Look how the stars turn on.